Dear viewers, subscribe to the channel and put a like on the video so YouTube can recommend you new stories and new chapters. If anything, you can always remove the like if you don't like the story. Thank you for your support, and here we go. On the cusp of cheating. Full story. Jessica was exhausted and a little fed up. She always came home for the holidays, alternating between Thanksgiving and Christmas with Michael's family. For most of her adult life, it had been a much-needed break from the busyness of her role as mother, wife, and businesswoman. After her mother's death, she was afraid things would be different this Christmas, but she wasn't prepared for having to play the role of hostess in her father's house. Of course, he'd made sure to cook the rib roast, and he'd made mashed potatoes, his special potatoes, creamy, rich, buttery, and probably heart-stopping. She would have to walk another 5 miles just for those potatoes. If it had been just them, it wouldn't have been so bad. But then Aunt Carolyn showed up with her brood and 2 cousins who were in their 20s and still living at home. They were useless. They stayed up late, talking after almost a year apart, drank too much eggnog, getting up at dawn to fill stockings and unwrap Santa's presents for Ashley's 6th Christmas had been a priority. But the lack of sleep combined with the long drive made her irritable. When you add to that the responsibility of preparing a traditional meal and all the other things going on in her life, she was becoming downright irritable. She turned to her father, who was checking the temperature of the roast. "Did we really have to invite Aunt Carolyn?" she muttered, meant for his ears only. "They're family, baby. You know her husband's in Shanghai, they'd be alone. You'd think they could do something to help." Her dad shrugged. "We wouldn't be very good hosts if we asked them to work." "I know, but you think they'd volunteer, don't you?" He grinned. "Before we judge, let's give them a chance to do the right thing." Jessica knew it was a waste of time. They had always been selfish, and today was no exception. Instead of helping, her 2 younger cousins monopolized Ashley's time by playing with her under the Christmas tree. At least someone was having a good time. She glanced across the dining room to the formal living room, where a 12-foot Christmas tree towered and a field of gifts for a 5-year-old stretched as far as the eye could see. Jessica went back to the stove, checking the list, and trying to get all the dishes done in time. At least Aunt Carolyn had set the table and baked the pies the night before. The incessant clanking of the homemade ice cream maker kept getting worse and worse, another irritant she could do without. But homemade pecan ice cream was another tradition. She'd always loved it growing up, but she was beginning to think she could do without it. Did it really always have to have nuts in it? And why sweet potatoes exactly? All those family gatherings to watch old and happy Christmas movies? Was she the only one who was sick of the banality and monotony? She felt familiar hands on her shoulders, which slid inside and began massaging her neck. She almost brushed them away, but realized that would have been noticed. She didn't need him pouting or her father asking questions. "Are you okay, Jess? Is there anything I can do to help?" Her husband's voice sounded next to her ear. "I think we're going to make it. We'll be ready to eat in less than 20 minutes. You better start tucking Ashley in." Michael walked over to the oven and peered into it to look at the roast that was about to come out. "You always make the most delicious meals, Dad," he said. "Once a year. I don't think that's the time to hold back." Her father opened the oven door and pulled out a magnificent roast, exposing 8 rib bones. That was their cue. 15 minutes to go. Jessica cleaned the front left burner and set the pan for her father, turning on the flame underneath. He lifted the roast by the grate and set it on the counter to settle, then poured half the droppings into the pan. Jess couldn't help but smile. So predictable. He always made a dark gravy for the jam. She slid past him, cupping his butt with hers to make room, and shoved 2 trays of cookies into the vacated oven. She skipped under his arms in a kitchen dance, returning to her side dishes, and he removed the sweet potatoes from the bottom shelf before closing the oven door. It was at times like these that her mother's absence hurt her the most. Playing in the kitchen, she remembered everything her mother had taught her, watching the interactions her parents had demonstrated throughout her life. She remembered how they had included her in the work over the years, tasking her with manually kneading potatoes, laying out biscuits, ordering all the kitchen utensils from the center island. Over the years, Her mother handed over more and more of her responsibilities to her daughter, while she herself remained in a secondary role, washing dishes as she went along, keeping track of time, setting the table, making iced tea, preparing the coffee maker, all background tasks that allowed her father and herself to manage a complex meal. She looked at the growing pile of dishes, and her irritation returned. You'd think someone could help. Her father touched her thighs and glanced at his watch. She patted it back, then did a little pirouette around it before peering into the buns. Looks good. It's up to you, her father said. The words made her choke a little. This was the first holiday without her mom, and her mom always called. 2 more minutes, she said. Her voice trembled. Her father put his muscular hand on her shoulder and touched her head. I do too, sweetheart. I miss her too. She loved Christmas dinner. He could always do it. He always knew what she was thinking. Jessica was Daddy's little girl, but the connection to him was stronger than almost anyone she knew. Maybe it was because she was an only child. Unlike many fathers, he had always been there for her when she was growing up. She remembered that he had only missed 1 basketball game in her entire high school career. He was shocked, called from the airport, and wished her luck. She made the winning shot. It was probably her best game ever. She remembered hearing the sound of the television around midnight and finding her father sitting in front of it in a chair pulled up close, watching a video her mother had made. It's not the same, Daddy, she said, taking the pots off the burners, draining the water, and taking turns filling the china sideboards. He kept stirring the sauce, adjusting the consistency by eye. I know, Pumpkin. He turned to her and ran his fingers through her long hair. Things may never be the same again, but what are you going to do? Give up. We keep going, baby. We adjust, we do our best, and we keep going. Michael entered the kitchen, standing off to the side. 7 years of training had taught him his role. Jessica pushed the finished dishes toward him, and he began passing them around the table. It was automatic, the result of years of familiarity. Jessica watched him, out of habit, to make sure everything was in its proper place. The huge pecan dining table had been a part of their lives for as long as Jessica could remember. 2 of the 3 leaves had been added to it, making it seating for 7. Her seat, as always, was to her father's left, Ashley next to her, between her and Michael. Across from her, to her father's right, sat Aunt Carolyn, and her sons sat next to her. With Mom gone, it just didn't feel right. She watched her husband as predictable as her father. He put the dishes in their places, then walked past each item to make sure everything was in order. Jessica pulled on heat-resistant gloves and removed the foil from the sweet potatoes. She cut them open and spread each one with a bit of butter. The beep of the timer alerted her, and she rushed to the oven, pulled out the rolls, and checked the bottoms. Perfect. She placed a heated brick in the bottom of the roll basket, covered it with a cloth, and loaded the rolls, which gave off steam, and then secured the 4 corners of the top to keep them hot and moist. Time to go, she announced. It was her choice now. Her father grinned, took the roast off the grill, and placed it on the largest serving platter. She leaned on it, adding sprigs of parsley and some fresh rosemary, as her mother always did. Michael stood waiting, cradling their daughter in his arms. This was something new. Ashley looked flustered. Sauce? He asked. She nodded and placed the cooked sweet potatoes on a plate while her husband filled the gravy boat. Her father had already poured the roast drippings into the second one. Michael took the basket of muffins and put it in their daughter's hands. He whispered something to her, and she nodded. Jessica watched him kiss Ashley's forehead, and she was pierced by pain again. Doubt flared up in her again. She pushed it away, at least for 1 more day. She didn't want to ruin Christmas. She owed it to them. Michael led the procession, entering the dining room and setting the gravy boats on a third of the table. Ashley carried an antique basket, and her smile flooded the room with joy. Her father pulled out a chair and lifted her up to stand in the seat. He put his arm around her waist as she leaned over the table to put the scones in the hole left for them. Aunt Carolyn, cousins Jeff and Rick were telling her how wonderful she did with the rolls, while her father lifted her into a chair and sat her down before handing her a napkin. Jessica brought out the second largest dish, with a pile of mashed potatoes in the center and foil-wrapped sweet potatoes around the perimeter. Michael motioned her to a chair and she sat down. "Perfect as always, Jess," he whispered, kissing her cheek. She fought the urge to roll her eyes. She always did. Her father finally appeared on the doorstep, carrying a huge roast that he placed directly in front of his place at the head of the table. The smell of ribs wafted into the room, and the expected silence broke when everyone started talking about the meal. It was enough to feed twice as many people, which was another tradition. No one left hungry or missed their favorite dishes. Macaroni and cheese, a 2-year-old tradition, was proof of that. Leftovers could be used to make meals for days to come. Dale spoke up. "As always, it's family tradition that we turn to the smartest among us on this special day. Ashley, would you say a blessing?" Jessica couldn't help but smile. Until her father had made the announcement 3 years ago, she had been responsible for saying thank you. Sometimes change was for the better. Ashley looked at her grandfather with a smile and folded her hands in front of her. "Bless us, Lord, and these, thy gifts." Jessica listened to her daughter recite the words of grace and thought about what Thanksgiving would be like, how the change would affect them, all of them. Amen. And God bless Mum and Dad, Grandpa Ed and Grandma Grace, Aunt Wendy and Uncle Christopher. Jessica saw her daughter glance at Michael, and he nodded for her to continue. Maddie and Katie, cousins Jeffy and Ricky, she looked across the table where the men were smiling at her. Aunt Carolyn and Grandpa Dale, and please take care of Grandma in heaven. Amen, Michael added beside her, and the rest of the feast supported him. He leaned over to her and whispered, "You did great, baby girl. I'm proud of you." Dale stood at the end of the table and looked at his family. "Ashley, that was a beautiful blessing, the best one we've ever had. Thank you." Jessica recalled that every year the blessing was the best blessing they had ever had. Her father abruptly raised his good carving knife and cut off the end of the roast. "Who wants a piece?" At dinner, everyone was heatedly discussing presents and Christmases past. They argued about which Christmas TV show was the best. Dale still defended A Christmas Story, while his sister didn't back down from Miracle on 34th Street. The male cousins were split, choosing National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and another vote for A Christmas Story. When Ashley insisted that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was the best, Michael changed his vote from White Christmas to Rudolph. Her father leaned over to Jessica. "You didn't add your 2 cents, pumpkin." "Does anyone really care, Daddy?" she muttered, putting food on her plate. He set the dishes aside and turned to face her. "Do you really think I don't care, Jessie?" He was the only one who ever called her that, at least she let him. "What's wrong, baby girl?" She sighed. "Never mind. Forget I said anything. I'm probably just tired." Her father leaned forward to get his granddaughter's attention. "Ashley, honey, what's your mom's favorite Christmas movie?" asked Dale. "Elf," said Ashley firmly. "Really, Daddy?" "Elf," Michael confirmed, "and then Christmas Vacation." Jessica blushed at this attention to her, which was the last thing she wanted. Was she really as predictable as everyone else? She pushed those thoughts away. Better not to go down that path. Not now. "The roast turned out perfect, Daddy, as always," he shrugged. "Over 30 years of practice, and he should be halfway decent." The conversation turned away from Jessica and onto safer topics. When the plates were empty and appetites were appeased, Jessica got up to clear the table of dessert and begin the unenviable cleanup. Carolyn quickly stood up to face the table. "No, you don't, young lady. Your work is done. We have dishes and cleanup to do. You and the grill master deserve a break." "Who wants coffee?" asked Michael, standing with an empty plate in his hands. No one said no, not even Ashley. He brought coffee, including Ashley's, which had the distinct aroma of chocolate and mini marshmallows floating on top. After dinner, they always waited until the first movie was over and then dessert. No one ever left room for dessert. Jessica and her father were escorted out of the dining room while the others cleaned up. They sat on the couch sipping coffee while Ashley played with her huge 3-story Barbie dream house that was almost as tall as herself. "How are we going to take this home, Daddy? It's too much. You always overdo it," said Jessica. Her father laughed. I don't recall you ever complaining about it when you were a kid. Don't worry, Michael and I will figure out a way to fit him in the van. We'll strap him in the front if we need to." She nodded absent-mindedly, her thoughts preoccupied with other problems. Her father moved closer and rubbed her shoulder. "Why don't you tell me what the problem is, Jessie?" She shook her head. "It's probably just the holidays. I have a lot of stress right now. I'll get over it soon." "I thought you and I could talk about anything. There's something eating you. You know you can tell me," he insisted. "It's no big deal, Dad. Let's just leave it alone, okay?" He nodded. "She's growing up fast," he said, as he watched Ashley arrange the furniture in the dollhouse. "You two are doing a great job with her." Jessica smiled. "Best thing I've ever had in my life," she said. Dale grinned. "I know the feeling." That little conversation was the only respite in the routine and the last interesting event of that Christmas. They watched a movie, ate dessert, and watched a second movie. They confessed how much they missed each other, and then did some pre-collection. Ashley fell asleep, and they tucked her in with her favorite toys. As is tradition, Jessica let Michael make love to her. Afterward, he snuggled up to her and told her that this was the best Christmas of his life, because he had her and Ashley. As always. At 10 the next morning, everything was packed and somehow squeezed into the car. After kissing each other, they prepared to leave. "Thanksgiving next year," Michael said. "I love your roast, Dad, but no one cooks turkey like you do. Don't tell Mom I said that." Ashley received more than her share of kisses, and then she was tucked into the back seat among the carefully selected Christmas gifts. At the last moment, Dale pulled his daughter aside. "I'm always a phone call away. I know your mom always made the calls, but I know how to use the phone too." Jessica hugged him, wondering what their next vacation would be like, and if they would be at all. "I'll call." She started to pull away, but he hugged her even tighter. "You have a wonderful life and a wonderful family. Family is everything. Don't forget that." "I know, Dad." "Really?" he asked, releasing her and holding her at arm's length, looking into her eyes. That look confused her. She hated to disappoint him. Times were different. Eventually, he would understand. She sighed. "We should go." His sad gaze haunted her throughout the 6-hour drive home. At the curb, she hugged her husband, then squatted down to hug her daughter. "Don't go, Mommy," the girl wailed. "It's just for a couple days, baby. Daddy and Miss Jill will take care of you. I'd hate to leave, but it's really important, you know?" Michael pulled out his wallet. "I know you never have enough cash on you. I'd hate to see you traveling without a few bucks in your wallet. Here." He put a few 20s in her hand. "I have credit cards and a debit card. I'll be fine." She took the money anyway, knowing he would argue until she did. Wasn't that the whole problem? She knew exactly what he would do before he even did it. "Call me," he said. "Call me when you get there so I know you got there safely." "I will. I'll try to call every night, but we'll be very busy." Very, very busy, she thought. He pulled an envelope from his back pocket and held it out to her. "Your father asked me to give this to you. I assume you told him about your trip. Did you know about it before Christmas?" She took the envelope in her hands. Her name was on the front, and his distinctive handwriting indicated who it was from. "I just found out. Didn't want to ruin Christmas." He nodded. "I'd like you to talk to me, Jess. I don't like these surprises. Sometimes I feel like I don't know half of what's going on in your life." She sighed. "Don't make a big deal out of it, Michael. It's only 3 days. I'll be back for New Year's Eve." She put the envelope in her purse and picked up her bags. "Be good to your father, Ashley." Jessica turned to walk through the airport doors. Standing in the ticket line, she looked back. Michael was holding their daughter on his shoulder. They both waved when they saw her looking at them. She waved at them both, then turned and walked forward one at a time. When she reached the end, she looked back. They were still looking at her. She gave them one last wave and walked over to the counter. Vacation travel was a hassle. She'd arrived more than an hour early, and now her flight was delayed for 40 minutes. She picked up her phone and texted him. 40-minute delay. Sorry. The response was almost instantaneous. "I hate every minute lost, but I'm willing to wait forever." She smiled. The man was full of shit, but he had a way with words. She felt a surge of strength again. Soon. I can't wait. For a few seconds, she waited impatiently for his answer, feeling that same hot feeling. Enough with the words, the pictures, the Skype. It was time. Apparently, he'd agreed. I can't believe the wait is almost over. What I'm about to do to you. She heard the announcement from upstairs. They were changing the gate. Damn it. Gotta go. Gate change. I'll text you when I get there. She closed her phone, grabbed her bags, and stood up with a sigh, moving 6 gates down, and then settled in for what looked like an hour-long wait. She placed her purse on the chair beside her, hoping to divert the attention of the businesslike Rome, who would consider an empty chair next to a single woman an invitation. She wasn't dressed particularly, didn't want to advertise what she was up to, but she knew she looked good. For him. Her gaze stopped on the envelope from her father. Michael's odd remark about her father knowing about her trip. She hadn't told anyone. She didn't dare, not even Jill, who would have made her even more upset, which she didn't need. She reached for the letter and found it sealed. She opened the end and pulled out the sheet scrawled in his handwriting. It was obvious he had taken the time to do this. Half the time his chicken handwriting was illegible, but not now. Dear Jessica, I want to tell you about a father's love. You should know that you are the best thing that ever happened to me and your mom. You made our lives complete and were never just a source of joy for us. Not that you've never been a source of trouble. Hell, we knew that before you were born. The heartburn you gave your mother almost drove me crazy. And those cravings she had, Chinese food, 3 or 4 days a week after week, always the same dish, same place. Is it any wonder white rice was all we could get you to eat for years? From the moment I first held you in my arms in the delivery room, you changed my life for the better. I held you in my arms and knew that from that moment on, you were my responsibility. I brought you into this world, and it can be difficult and challenging. I told myself then that I would always be there for you. Your anchor in the stormy sea of life. You were a cranky kid. Drove me and my mom crazy. Every night for about 4 months, your screams woke us up. You know how your mom likes to sleep, so I got over it. Night after night, I cuddled you, holding you to my chest. After a few minutes of pacing the floor, you would quiet down. Unless, of course, I tucked you in. I learned quickly. I would walk with you until the crying stopped, and then I would hold you in the old rocking chair. The one that's in my bedroom now. Now you know why I said I'd never get rid of it. I would hold you in my arms and rock you. I would sing for you. I know you were too little to be punished like that, and I'll be damned if I'd sing for anyone else, but I'd sing for you. I'd sing and you'd sleep. All night I would hold you in my arms, looking at your precious face, memorizing every feature, every hair. Your mom gave me hell several times for napping with you in her arms. She was afraid I might drop you in your sleep. Groundless fears, I knew better. Nothing short of Armageddon would make me drop you. Whether you were asleep or not, you were mine, and nothing would hurt you as long as I could take a breath, and certainly not me. Your mom would come in for her shift around 6 in the morning, and I would crawl into bed to sleep for a couple hours before work. I lost a lot of sleep because of you in those first 6 months. I don't regret a single minute of it. That time holding you in my arms is one of my favorite memories. Your mom thinks it was those first few months that brought us together, created an unbreakable bond. I know we have many memories in common, and you have heard many stories, but those early years were so dear that I can't help myself. You were too young to remember them, but I can replay them on demand, and do so often. Saturdays were wonderful. Your mom worked Saturdays for the first 4 years of your life. Saturdays were for us. You were all mine. As soon as you were old enough to let me know what you wanted, and in no uncertain terms, we'd take the morning Slurpee at 7. 11. Stop by your mom's work so you could see each other, and then we'd go. You were so smart, so curious about everything. We'd drive for a long time, and you'd pepper me with questions. When you ran out, I would tell you stories. I would look at you sitting in your car seat, looking at the world around you, and I would think about how lucky I was. I remember the first time you insisted on driving. I held you on my lap, your tiny hands resting on the steering wheel. We crawled together, your hands turning the steering wheel, and my fingers secretly holding it from underneath, because you got very angry if you couldn't do it yourself. I only had to give him a nudge every now and then. Your mom was so angry, but when we did it as a family, she understood. But even then, you were undeniable. I think it was in 3rd grade when you asked me about a book and I hadn't read it. You were shocked, like I had failed you because I didn't know all the books that had ever been written. From then on, every book you had to read for school, I pulled out of your briefcase the first night you brought it home. I would take it into my study when you and Mom were already asleep and read it cover to cover. To be able to answer any question you had, I would never let you down again. At first, it would only take a few minutes, but by high school, it could drag on for hours. I started reading all your books as soon as they came into the house. You would get annoyed that I was reading the book before you, and the next thing you knew, you were reading it cover to cover the first night you had it. Of course, by the next day I had a chance, and we could discuss it. Do you really think I read all those books for pleasure? I read them to share them with you, because I loved you. Believe me, it took a hell of a lot of love. I don't want to think about how many hundreds of hours I spent listening to music that sometimes made me want to pound a pencil into my eardrums. If it was a band you mentioned, or something you hummed on the radio, I would sit down at my computer late at night and look them up. I listened to their music, compared it to the music I loved, and looked for similarities. I would introduce you to my music, and we could talk. I wanted to understand you, and I wanted there to be a bridge between us. I still think you owe me an apology for the Backstreet Boys' Hanson years. As you grew older, you still reached out to me, all the way through middle school. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know what to do. I was a first-time dad. Things were going downhill for me, but I swear to you, I did the best I could. I hope you believe that. I know that at times my participation in your activities has probably annoyed you. Assistant coach on your volleyball team, team leader on your Destination Imagination project, chaperone on your weekend volunteer hikes. I'm sorry about that. My only excuse is that I wanted to be there for you if you needed me. I lived with a timer. I knew I was slowly losing you. Your friends, your studies, your classes were dragging you down. College was getting closer and closer. It was selfish of me, but I wanted to spend as much time with you as possible before you left. You were the best daughter ever. So beautiful, so smart, such a kind and loving child. You are a lot like your mother. I'm sorry you have so many of my traits. If I had a dime for every person who said you looked like me, I'd be a rich man. Honestly, I don't see it. You're so beautiful, and I'm nothing special. High school was difficult, I'll admit. That's when your mother and I had the most conflicting ideas about your upbringing. We both know she was overprotective, and I was overindulgent. She wanted to know where you were every minute of every day, what you were doing, who your friends were, what you were learning in school. She hated it when you spent the night away from home. The thought of you driving scared the hell out of her. Even a drop of rain was cause for panic if you were on the road. I had the opposite tactic, and I know it drove her crazy. I trusted you. I trusted that we raised you right, and I expected you to make the right decisions. I told you that you could do anything you set your mind to, and I believed it with every fiber of my being. My daughter could do anything. You have thrived, but not without some hiccups along the way. Admittedly, some of them were painful. Several times you've chosen your friends poorly. I won't remind you of the 2 times I stood next to you in municipal court. I was shocked, and the second time I was very angry, but I stood by you. You learned from your mistakes, and I was proud of you. Friends were a different problem. I know you hated me there for a while freshman year. It broke my heart, but I did it for you. Taking you out of public school, ripping you away from your problems, and putting you in a private school wasn't easy in many ways. $14,000 a year was a lot of money to us, but your future was infinitely more valuable. I took your judgment and the rift it caused between us to get your life back on track. I drove you 12 miles to and from school, and even though you barely spoke to me for 2 months, I still treasure those moments alone with you. Riding in the car together like we did those first 4 years. I know my words seem rambling, but they make sense. I did the best I could. I spared no expense. I tried like hell to give you a great start in life. Because I loved you. I loved every moment we spent together. The memories of you and your mom are the most precious thing I'll ever have. For everything I've done, I've seen the payoff. You got into the college of your choice. You earned your master's degree in 4 years. You found an amazing job. And I was amazed that by the time you were 25, you were making more money than I had in my entire life. That's what any father wants for his child. for them to have a better life than he had. In your case, it was a challenge because I had you. Then you met Michael. I knew I was going to hate him the moment I heard his name. The way you said it, the way your eyes lit up. He didn't make much of an impression on me when we met. I wanted the best for you. I'm a father. Boys scare me when it comes to you. I never told you, but there's a reason our friends in the neighborhood moved away. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'd do it again. Your mom told me about your first experience with Andy. It didn't cost him anything to talk you into making him or his friend feel good. I confronted his father. I told him I was upset and why. He said he was sorry and that he would talk to Andy. Unfortunately, the conversation, as I later found out, was congratulatory, and he encouraged his son to do more. I won't tell you what I did, but it was the reason they divorced and moved away. I did a bad thing, but I would do it again tomorrow to protect you. There's nothing I wouldn't do. I'm willing to condemn my soul to hell if it will save yours. Maybe it does. Back to Michael. That little bastard wanted my daughter, my perfect little girl. I knew why. Hell, anyone who looked at you knew why. You were beautiful, and you've had his attention since you were a baby. He didn't deserve you. No way. In fact, I wasn't sure anyone did. I was wrong. I admit it took me a few years to come to that conclusion. He's a good man. He's been a great provider, husband, and father. Of course, that's my opinion, an outsider's perspective. I don't have to live with this guy. What's more, he loves you and your daughter, and that little girl loves the ground he walks on. He'd do anything for her. We're not much alike. I guess not all girls marry a man like their father. But in the way he is with her, the way they are together, I see us, you and me, the way we were, the same love, the same desire to protect, Daddy's love. Jessica, I've always been proud of you. Always. You're everything a father could want. Until now. Don't do it. I don't know what your problem is, but you don't want to talk to me anymore. With your mother gone, I know you don't care about her. But something's wrong. I know you, Jessie. I know you probably better than I know myself. If you're reading this, I know you're about to make a big mistake, the biggest one of your life. I've always told you that I would support you in any situation. This time, I can't. It's about Daddy's love, the love I had for you, the best part of my life. If you do this, you will most likely destroy your family. You will sever the bond between your husband and your daughter. You'll rob him of the relationship we had. You're stealing the memories, the moments these two should have had. It's the cruelest thing I can imagine. If anyone tries to come between you and me, tries to steal these moments from me, I will tear the damn world apart before I let it happen. And I won't sit idly by while you do it to him. Again, I don't know your problems. The only thing I do know is that to the outside world you have been good for each other. He is not abusive. He supports you and loves you both. You have done an incredible job raising my granddaughter. You loved him once. I know you love that little girl. If your problem is serious, he deserves to know about it and try to solve it. This little girl deserves at least the same. I hope you make every effort to make things right before you give up. Fight for what you have. Don't give up so easily. You're an adult. I can't tell you what to do. All I can do is hope that I raised you right and that you make the right decisions and be there for you when you need me. If you continue this, if you break this child's heart, if you take away the opportunity for Michael to have the connection that I had, the memories that keep me going, I will not support you. If you don't do the right thing and make every effort to fix the problem, you will destroy more than one bond. It pains me to say this, but I will no longer consider myself your father. My daughter would not be sitting in an airport right now about to betray her husband, her daughter, her family, and everything she was made to believe in. Not my daughter. I won't believe it. I'm begging you. Don't betray Daddy's love. Don't destroy it just because you can. Don't break Dad's heart into a million pieces. I want to believe I raised you better. I have to do that, or else I've failed at the only thing that's ever mattered to me. You. Sincerely, Dale. Jessica stared at the paper, at the smudged handwriting at the end that told her more than words about how hard it had been for him to write this, how much she'd hurt him. The signature alone screamed his pain. The wet spots became more frequent as his harsh words reached their destination, and her tears joined his tears on the thin parchment. How he knew. She couldn't understand. She never could, but he always knew. She was on the verge of doing something irreversible. Something that could very well destroy her marriage and her family. And for what? Because she was bored? Tired of the same old routine? Someone was complimenting her, flattering her, flirting with her, and she loved the attention and excitement. Was it worth breaking her vows and risking everything that mattered to her? Was she that kind of woman? She told herself she deserved a little new experience. It wouldn't hurt anyone. She could spill it out and no one would find out. And if they did, she knew Michael loved her enough to forgive her. And if he didn't, would that be such a bad thing? Their life had come to a standstill. She could have a better life. What the hell was she thinking? She grabbed her phone. Plans have changed. It's over. Don't contact me again. She prayed that it wouldn't be too late, that the mistakes she'd already made wouldn't be too serious, that she'd be forgiven. She had to wipe the tears from her eyes twice before she could dial the phone number correctly. Michael, the trip is canceled. Can you come back and get me?
What's wrong, Jess? Something's wrong, isn't it? What's wrong? We're not even home yet. I can be there in 20 minutes. She could hear the worry and panic in his voice. Take your time. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll explain everything later tonight if you don't mind. It's complicated. I just want to apologize. Don't worry about it. So I wasted an hour. What's the big deal? Instead, I got you for 3 more days. 3 days we'd never get back. I'll hang up. There's traffic ahead. I'll be there as soon as I can. I know you will. I love you, Michael. I love you too, baby. She stared at her phone. A new message appeared. She replied angrily. Over. No more. Leave me alone. She looked at her feet where she had dropped the letter. She picked it up, organizing the pages. She folded it and put it back in the envelope. She picked up the phone again, dialed the almost forgotten number. Dad? I did a bad thing. A terrible thing. No, Pumpkin. Yes, and I don't know what to do. You did a bad thing, little girl. You didn't do a terrible thing, and I'm sure you know what to do about it. His voice echoed in her ears. She lifted her head and saw him, not 20 feet away from her, but the whole time. She saw the traces of tears on his face. Before she knew it, he was swinging over the row of chairs in front of her. He picked her up in his arms before she could fall. Of course he knew. He would never let her get hurt. She knew that. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. He held his little girl in his arms, the most precious thing in the world. She was no longer an infant at his breast, no longer a tiny toddler learning to drive on his lap. She wasn't the angry teenager or the proud graduate, not the beauty standing at the altar as he married her off, nor the exhausted new mom, pale, sweaty, matted hair, the most gorgeous person she'd ever been, handing him her only grandchild. No, she was none of those things. She was all of those things and more. I know you're sorry, Pumpkin, but you're talking to the wrong person. How's Dad? How do I tell him? What can I say? I blew it. He withdrew her hands and wiped the tears from her face. He hugged her and walked her to her things. He didn't like the fact that the guy sitting 2 seats away from him was looking at her purse. No one was prying into his family. My girl can do anything. You'll find a way. I know you will. Will you come with me? Michael will be here in a few minutes. No, Jessie. This is between you guys. I have somewhere I need to be. Overhead, the boarding call for her flight was announced. He put his arms around her and kissed her. I knew you'd do the right thing. She called after him as he left. Where are you going? I have a plane to catch. No one interfered in his family's affairs. Jessica lifted her eyes from the dishes and looked out the window where her daughter was playing. She played outside a lot, giving Michael and her time to sort out her problems. He hadn't gone unpunished, but she wasn't stupid enough to try and blame it on him. It was 90% her fault. She had everything she wanted, everything she dreamed of, everything she talked about, and it wasn't enough. She smiled to herself. Her ass was still sore. She absolutely couldn't believe he had spent such a hot evening with her. She hadn't been spanked since she was 5 for lying. Few things made her father angrier than brazen lies. She remembered the tears on his face. The spanking from Michael didn't lead to tears, at least on his part. The moment had been passionate, fierce, demanding. She was almost afraid to tell him that he'd been the best she'd been in years, later, in his arms. For the first time in her memory, he wasn't crying for Ashley. He hugged her tightly. You don't hate me? You don't hate me for treating you like this? He said. I'm sorry.
She turned in his arms and kissed him. Hate you. Never. I love you. And I know you're angry with me. And I have every right to be. If an incredible evening is the price I have to pay to make it up to you, I think we can handle it. She chuckled. You were an animal. Damn, that was hot. He chuckled. I know. Not too. I don't know, Cro-Magnon? Not at all. When you pressed me against your stomach, I thought for a second you were going to do something more salacious. You scared me a little. I almost did it. I don't know how I got so carried away, Michael admitted. Jessica pressed herself against him. Next time you need to do this to me, maybe you should do it. He stiffened in her embrace. You said... To hell with my words. I'm yours, Michael. Get that into your stupid head. If it turns out I really hate it, it'll be the last time.
I love you, Jess, he whispered, his hands moving, and she found him tense in more than one place. She pushed him onto his back and climbed on top of him with a tiny grimace. It hurt, but she needed it. Both of them. Years of vanilla evenings had been just one of the problems, but they seemed to have gotten over that one. She kissed her husband, swaying slowly. Don't ever tell Daddy about this. He'll just explode. He doesn't believe in corporal punishment. Michael laughed. You don't know your father as well as you think you do. This was his idea. He said he'd fry your ass. Have you spoken to him since then? I talk to him at least once a month, mostly about the challenges of raising a 5-year-old girl. We talked yesterday. He wanted to know if he'd have to pick you up and drive you home, or if I'd keep you around. The surprises kept coming. Dad and Michael are talking. She kissed him again. Have you come to any decisions? She asked, teasing him by wiggling her hips. There was never a question. You always stayed. For Ashley's sake, if nothing else. There was a chance we'd both be miserable. But if that's the price, then so be it. There wasn't an ounce of playfulness in his words. Jessica stopped moving. Are you unhappy? Did I ruin everything? He slapped her butt hard, and she jumped up, nearly twisting out of his arms. No, I'm not unhappy. I might have problems with you for a while. I may say some nasty things, and trust will have to be worked on, but I'm not unhappy. I love you. She leaned over and hugged him. I'm sorry. If you ever need to vent your anger, I was hoping you'd consider taking me to bed, sunbathing and screwing me to the fullest. I'll never complain. He chuckled, slapping her playfully. That's one hell of an apology. Now cheer up, cowgirl. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. Her reverie was broken by the sight of the swing. She had to wipe the condensation off the window to make sure she was seeing correctly. Ashley was swinging, laughing at the top of her voice, and her dad was nudging her. Her dad. She dropped the dishes and ran to the back door. She saw Ashley hugging her grandfather. Jessica called out to him, but he just waved and disappeared into the woods behind the house. Ashley ran to the porch. Grandpa says hi to you. He told me to give you this. Jessica was shocked. She looked at the forest. It was as if he had never been there. Ashley pressed herself against her thigh, holding the envelope in her hands. How long has he been here? Not for long this time. This time? Has he done this before? Ashley nodded. A lot. He says it's a secret. I'm not supposed to tell. Dad says it's okay. She took the note from her daughter, trying to understand. Why wouldn't he come in? After tucking her daughter in, she sat down in front of the fireplace and read the note. Dear Jessie, I may have to disappear for a while. I've done a bad thing. I want you to know that I'm as proud of you today as I ever was. I told you you had a good man, didn't I? You're probably wondering why I was spying on you. I hope you realize I only wanted to see you. That's all I ever wanted to do. I don't want to interfere. You should have your own life. But sometimes the longing gets too much because your mother is gone. So I look in on you. I look. I listen. I peek. I need to know what's going on in your life. And without your mother, I must have gone a little crazy. I hope you can forgive me. I'll stop. It's probably best if I'm not seen around you, at least for a while, just in case. Love your husband and our precious little girl. Think of me sometimes. All my love, always, Dad. That explains the text messages. They haven't stopped all day. Text messages and emails. Then they stopped. Not a peep since. She remembered the story with the neighbors. She should have known. The envelope contained a gift certificate for a year of dance lessons for 2 at Arthur Murray's. No explanation.
She wiped her eyes, stood up, and looked toward the woods. He was out there somewhere, watching her. Of course he was. She had to know. He'd always known. She grinned for a moment. My father, the stalker. She opened the sliding door and screamed, "I love you, Daddy." He didn't answer, but she knew he heard her, even though he was out of hearing range. An hour later, she picked up the phone and called her husband. "Is something wrong?" he asked. She never called during the day. "No, just the opposite. I love you and I want you to know that. You need to clear out Tuesday night. We're going dancing." He laughed. "I think I can handle it. And come home as soon as possible. I need to seriously apologize. I have a new outfit I want you to see," she teased. "Have you been misbehaving, naughty girl?" he asked softly. "Yes. It's unseemly, isn't it?" She giggled. "Very naughty. You know, I think I'd like to see that." She felt herself blushing. Would you like to look at me?" "Definitely. Isn't it too early? There's hardly anyone here because of the holiday break. I can leave in 10 minutes. "Give me an hour. I have a couple things to do. I need to take Ashley to Jill's. Look for me in the bedroom. I'll be alone with the toys." "You're driving me crazy, Jess," Michael said. "That's the idea, my dear husband. I love you." She hung up the phone and called her best friend Jill, who happily took it upon herself to keep an eye on Ashley when she found out why. "Is Donna still having toy parties?" asked Jessica. Jill laughed. "Really? You're thinking about going to him? Are you?" "Actually, I'm hoping for a private screening. I kind of have an emergency. I told Michael he'd get a treat when he got home." "Never mind, Donna. I have 2 items still sitting in boxes. You'll owe me." "Absolutely. You're a lifesaver, Jill. That's what friends are for, to help and look out for each other, right?" "Okay, I'll see you in a little while." That's what friends are for. Friends and Daddy. Epilogue. Dale sat in a place of honor at the end of the kitchen island and watched. His daughter handed him another bowl to dry, which he placed in front of him. She looked so much like her mother, every demeanor reminding him of her. Jessica spotted another dirty pan next to the stove and began maneuvering the battlefield while her husband and daughter worked to get all the dishes ready in time. She was almost to the end when she suddenly found herself in Michael's arms. He signaled her, nudged her slightly, then pulled, lifting her arm above her head. She twisted past him, then back, his hand traveling down her lower back, his foot sliding between her legs as she slowly leaned back. Ashley laughed, clapping her hands together. Michael pulled his wife to him and gave her a quick kiss before releasing her to her duties. Her son made his feelings known with a quick "you" before rushing into the kitchen to find his cousins. "The lower one will get ready faster." Michael laughed. "You want to be in charge, Dad?" "No way. It's too late. I'm not going to take the blame." Ashley scrambled out from under her father's arms and pulled her grandfather by the arms. "Dance with me, Grandpa!" Jessica turned on the music. Grandfather and granddaughter bonded with the ease of years of practice. Dale smiled. Ashley was a clone of his daughter. Tall, beautiful, brilliant, carefree, loving. He grinned. "Did that pretty girl get anything from your family, Michael?" "She looks like her mother again." Michael turned, hugging his wife. "Last name?" Ashley was a much better dancer than he was. It wasn't surprising since she had a dozen years of dance lessons under her belt, and her parents danced like pros. She was graceful and could easily handle his mistakes. The music slowed, and Dale led his granddaughter, deftly switching partners. His little girl was in his arms. Christmas had come, and everything in the world was right. Well, almost everything. "What surprise are we going to have this year?" she asked quietly. "What?" "You know, every year there's something new. You remember, dance lessons 12 years ago, then scuba lessons, tennis, golf, taekwondo, sailing, art. You just went crazy with it all. It's like you never wanted us to have a spare moment." "I just wanted my girl to be happy. As I recall, you were bored once." She blushed. "Not anymore." That was the plan. He looked to the other end of the room, where a sullen young man was watching the whole thing. "I don't like the way he looks." "Dad, we've done everything we can. She'll make her own decision." The girl moved her lips to his ear. "He's toast anyway. Michael can't stand him." Dale laughed. I always knew there was something I liked about that bum you married." "Hey, Dad, seriously, I'm here," shouted Michael in mock anger. Dale looked at the man who was leading his daughter, stirring a pot on the stove. "Yes, it is. That's good, isn't it?" Michael looked at his daughter, then at his wife. "There's no place in the whole world I'd rather be." "God, Dad!" Ashley laughed, pushing him away. "What are you crying? What a wuss!" Jessica turned away from her father so no one would see the tears in his eyes, or in her eyes. "So is the flurry of classes over now that she's graduated?" she asked, snuggling against his chest. Their dance was interrupted by a rumbling noise coming from the living room. Jessica looked around and saw her son in the very center of the room. "No roughhousing in the doorway! Go outside!" she shouted. She turned around, and he was waving some paper in her face. She snatched it out of his hands and read it.
"Spanish lessons?" He nodded, looking at his daughter working on the stove. "Don't let it boil over," she called out. "I know, Mom," Ashley replied, turning down the gas. "She knows everything," Jessica muttered. "Have I really been so insufferable?" "For everyone but me," Dale laughed. "I've got some serious news. I've decided I don't want to alternate holidays anymore." She looked at him in surprise. Ashley dropped the spoon. Even Michael, the always poised Michael, was shocked. "Shit," he whined, nibbling on the edge of the hand he'd touched the edge of the pan with and burned himself. "Daddy," Jessica said, "I know it's hard, but we're trying to be fair. We need to spend time with Michael's mother, especially now. We've always done that. It's as much a tradition as turkey and roast." Dale checked his watch again. She was running late. The door swung open and children burst into the foyer. "Grandma's here." Dale winked at his daughter, and then Michael ran out of the room toward his mom. "Great!" Dale rushed after him. "I've got a roast. Mama's boy." "What are you up to, old man?" asked Jessica, looking at him reproachfully. "I thought it was time to shake things up a bit. No one should spend the holidays away from their family." He turned away from his daughter and embraced the latest guest. When he pressed his lips to hers, you could hear a pin drop. "You're late," Dale told her. She grinned. "Someone left a pack of heathens outside. I didn't think I'd make it to the door." Michael's mother reached out and ran her fingers through Dale's hair. "Did you tell them?" "So what's the surprise going to be?" Dale chuckled. "You want honors? There's no way you're blaming this on me. You started it yourself." "I called, as I recall," she interrupted him, covering her mouth with her hand. Denise turned to her son, then to her daughter-in-law. "After Ashley graduated from high school, your father and I kind of bonded. More than that, as I recall." The hand covered his mouth again. "You be quiet." She turned to her son. "I thought I should give him credit. He really did raise one hell of a girl." "Doubts, come on. One more word, Dale, and you'll be sleeping on the porch." Ashley laughed. "So tell me, Grandma, if he's quiet and still, where can he sleep?" Denise blushed. "I don't think it's any of your business, you little troublemaker."
"Seriously, Grandma? Have you even thought this through? The house is packed to the gills. You'll be lucky to find a sleeping bag in the attic." "Not while I have a bed." "Deal!" Eventually, the laughter subsided, and Dale enclosed Denise in his arms again. "Don't fight it. I'm irresistible, you know that. You said so yourself." "Damn it, Dale. Are you going out of your way to embarrass me?" "No, baby. I'll do my best to let everyone know that you're as crazy about me as I am about you." It took a while longer before the conversations died down. Everyone around him looked at him with confused looks. No one had expected this. After all, they lived almost 700 miles apart. He had been single for 13 years, dating, but nothing serious. Her husband had passed away 2 years earlier, suddenly, of a heart attack. They were nothing like each other, except for their love for their families. "Spanish lessons, then?" asked Jessica. "We decided to get married in June in Buenos Aires. I always wanted to learn how to dance the tango." Jessica laughed. "There's never a dull moment with you, is there, Daddy?" "Never again." Here is the end of this compelling story of a father's lifelong devotion to his daughter Jessica. The narrative unfolds through a series of flashbacks and reflections, revealing the depth of their relationship and the sacrifices Dale made to ensure her happiness and success. From teaching her to drive as a child to reading all of her school books from cover to cover, Dale's commitment to Jessica's well-being is palpable. He copes with the challenges of fatherhood, from conflicts with her mother to concerns about her friendships and romantic relationships. Despite their differing parenting styles, Dale and Jessica's mother share a common goal: to provide their daughter with the best possible future. When Jessica faces a crisis in her marriage, Dale's love and support remain unwavering. He pleads with her not to make a decision that could destroy her family, drawing on their shared memories and the values he instilled in her. In the end, Jessica decides to reconcile with her husband, realizing the importance of their bond and the impact of her actions on their daughter. The story concludes with a heartwarming scene of family unity when Dale's unexpected gesture brings joy and laughter to their holiday party. Despite the challenges they face, the love and bond between Jessica, her husband Michael, their children, and Dale shines through, reminding us of the strength of family bonds and the importance of forgiveness and reconciliation. Thank you, dear viewer, for watching to this point. I remind you that your subscription and likes are very important to the channel, so don't spare 2 seconds of your life to make our channel grow and continue to develop. Thanks for watching. Be as cheerful as Dale and Jessica.